Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dragon's Library. Today we have a newly released horror game because the summer drought is a horrible thing. However, before we start, I need to have a real talk for a moment. I usually stream on Twitch for 2 weeks and then take a week off while I'm on call for work. So when I was about to get off call, I started looking for a game to play while I waited for Thymesia to come out. Eventually, I settled on this new horror game called Madison. Thought it'd be fun. We'll get to the game in a moment, but I need to talk about the studio for a second. See, the only reason I know about this game is because I was searching for any new release I could find online and vaguely remembered a trailer at the last E3. Looked decent. After I finished playing Madison while working on my script, I tried researching the studio that developed it, Bloodious Games. But I could find nothing on them. Their website redirects to the Madison page. The only info I could find was what they developed Madison, and they used to be called Nosebleed Games, according to Gamatsu. That same website says they're based out of Argentina, of all places, but that's really all I have. I tried searching Wikipedia, but neither Madison, Bloodious, or Nosebleed Games have a wiki page. The closest I found was another developer called Nosebleed Interactive. And it's just weird, right? The game has decent graphics and looks like it took a decent amount of work and some money, but there's just so little out there about it aside from the Madison Twitter account Steam store page. Now, this is true as of August 16th, so maybe there will be some more info in the future if this studio continues to make games, but until then, it will continue to be a little weird to me. So, moving on from this weird phantom developer, what is Madison? Madison is described as a first-person psychological horror game according to its Steam page. The main influences seem to be PT, which gave us Creepy Haunted House, and Fatal Frame, which gave us the Haunted Camera. The designers did an excellent job of recreating the supernatural house from PT, and the camera acts as your central item, allowing you to progress or activate certain objects. I guess now is a good time to explain the story. You play as Luca, a teenage boy who wakes up alone in his room on a stormy night. We're already off to a great start, I see. Your head is ringing, and the sound of someone pounding on the door doesn't help your headache. However, as you get up, you realize your hands are covered in blood. And your dad is the one pounding on the door, demanding answers. As you get your bearings, the player finds a bloody tin with pictures of severed limbs, and your dad begins implying you've killed your sister and mother. So we're already off to a fantastic start. The static of the TV barely lights your small corner of the room, and despite the main character having no idea what is going on and begging for help, your dad decides he's going to put you down. So, with no other options, Luca finds a hammer and makes his way through the boarded-off connection to the adjoined house. This is where your recently deceased grandfather had lived prior to his death. Going through the house to the new home, where the rest of the game will take place, you find it a mess. Strange occult symbols and newspaper clippings of some old tragedy are everywhere. The kitchen is a disaster. Creepy photos gleam from the walls. It's really well done. Anyway, after finding a few items, you open up a present addressed to Luca. The creepy box is just sitting on a chair, surrounded by a circle of candles. Totally not a trap or some occult ritual. Inside, you find a Polaroid camera, and after you take a picture, the chair spins around, making it very clear that this place is haunted. And Luca is still asking what's going on, and it's like, ghosts, Luca. Ghosts. Desperate to escape, Luca progresses further into the house. All the while it becomes clear your grandfather, and more recently your father, had something to do with this, or at least knew about whatever was haunting you. But I'll get into that later. After some more key hunting and turning on the generator, you find a tape from some priest who reveals you're suffering from a form of demonic possession.
From the moment of first contact, it is already too late. When a demon attaches itself to a human,
Demons?
it becomes a parasite of sorts. It feeds from the host until it devours every last part of their soul. In most instances, the demon's relentless objective is to get back to the world of the living. If you want to break that link, well, I'm afraid it's no simple matter. I could speak at length about various rituals and procedures, but by far the best way is to obey. Help the demon attain that which it seeks. Only then will the demon leave of its own accord. Usually they enter the earthly plane through certain objects that they use as conduits between worlds. Even if you rid yourself of that object later, the demon has made the contact it needs, and already walks among us. In the first stages of possession, the host human tends to withdraw from friends and family, becoming aggressive,
so Dad thinks
even violent. This is the result of the spiritual battle between the host and the entity, both vying for control over the mortal body. The symptoms that indicate that the possession is progressing are dizziness, nausea, and headaches, the latter of which can be so intense as to render the host unconscious for days. The dark entity manipulates its host with visual hallucinations and voices in the mind. Destroying the sanity of the host is for the purpose of making them
I can't believe
malleable,
Dad contacted this
compliant.
person.
This is how the demon fully exerts its insidious control. Oh, and before I forget, several cases of possession saw strange behavioral patterns in nearby insects, cockroaches in particular. My advice, steer clear of the insects.
There's just no way. I can't be possessed.
This whole thing is linked to a serial killer named Madison Hale, who was killed by the police upon discovery of a ritual she was performing with their dismembered victims. Proceeding down into the basement, you find an impossible space below, a giant cavern with a sealed well. So, what do? Well, the door's blocked, and Luca apparently can't break a window, or he'll be even more trouble, so we pop that sucker open. The lid is too heavy, but luckily, the camera is magic. After falling down into an equally impossible basement, flooded with water, we find a radio and walk straight into an area walled off with police tape, because, screw all the warnings. As the shadows begin going nuts and something darts around just out of sight, the police officer from the reports, Officer Russell, begins speaking over the radio, and well, I'll just let you listen.
Officer Russell here. June 17th, 1987, 5:27 a.m. I am now entering Madison Hale's basement.
Hale? 1987?
I can see there's a sort of well in the center of the room. Looks like it's open. I'm gonna investigate further, see what's on the other side of this. God, there's a horrendous smell coming from down here. Oh, God. I almost can't take it. Time to make things worse. I can't see a goddamn thing down here. Shit. I think I found the missing individuals. They're all mutilated. Legs, arms, they're just everywhere. I can't see Madison. I don't think she's here. I gotta get out of here.
Oh, God.
What was that? I think I'm not alone. There's definitely someone here. Madison? Is that you? Please! Show yourself! That's an order! Stand back! Put your hands up where I can see them. Don't come any closer. Step back. I said step back.
So, yeah. After that, Luca has a round of camera tag with Madison before eventually finding an exit and heading back up. With the information given, it appears as if Madison is, haunting you and using you to conduct some kind of ritual, and really you have no say in the matter. Sucks to be Luca. So, with the story established, let's get to the visuals. This might be one of the best looking horror games I've seen, or at least that's pretty high up there. Graphics are crisp and fantastic, but I did play this on the PS5, so I'm not sure how it performs on PC. From what I've read in the Steam reviews, it seems on par with what I played. The house is this highly detailed and decrepit place, which they manage by keeping it to a small environment for the most part. Dim lighting and scuttling insects give it the feeling of being left to rot. The monsters are quick flashes that do a good job of never staying on screen too long, which creates the fear of the unknown. The player never quite knows what that flicker in the distance was. The excellent visuals are complemented by the sound design, tiny little scrapes and latches echoing through the home. The game uses its sounds to amplify the setting, and oftentimes sound cues can be used to prepare for jump scares or attacks, which give the player a bit more agency, even when there's nothing you can do. The whine of the camera flash, often punctuated by a supernatural crash when you snap the supernatural photo and it begins rusting out. This brings me to my favorite part of the game, the house itself. Grandpa's abandoned home is probably the game's most impressive feature. The whole thing is full of details and strange oddities. Why are half the pictures gone? What's the medication all over Grandpa's bed? Why does that statue keep vanishing Weeping Angel style? When you first start playing, the atmosphere is downright oppressive. The floorboards are creaking and the doors shutting, objects will shift and rearrange themselves. Bloodious Studio really makes you feel the presence of demons and ghosts, as if they're right behind you the whole time. The whole system is semi-random too. New effects and modifications are added as you complete puzzles, and so the house almost starts to feel alive in its own way. The whole thing is a masterclass in atmospheric design and horror effects. Unfortunately, this ends up conflicting with the gameplay, which is slow and methodical. It's just, it's a game, not a movie. So I guess I have to talk about that now. Oh dear. Despite calling itself a psychological horror game, that is not a genre, but adventure games are. And Madison is the worst sort of adventure game. You find an obscure key, and you put it in an inscrutable lock. It starts out fine and relatively simple. You use a camera to uncover clues that lead to solutions. You often get pointed at where you need to go and where the answer is in this general area. Basic puzzle. Here's the problem, here's where you can find your tools, go find a solution. But after the well sequence, you head into the attic where you find the photos. Now, after 20 minutes of trying to use the 2 photos I found up there, I realized you need to find the other photos around the house. Once I got them all, however, nothing happened. A bit more guesswork and to figure out how to use the camera to open up the next area. A bit shaky, but okay. The next few puzzles are fine, and to be honest, most of the time-traveling church was great. But it's near the end of the section where the game goes off the rails, and it's really telling just how objectively I can point to the moment. See, up until this point, I had not been in any real unscripted danger. But then I am suddenly murdered by a Nazi ghost who is immune to my camera while trying to finish a puzzle. Turns out that puzzle becomes a time challenge within the last minute or so. The game is really bad to explain this, so I died a few times trying to flash the ghost like the game taught me to do each time he killed me. What you need to do is run away, kind of around him, and set the last candle down to finish the candle puzzles. A little shaking, but still having enjoyed that section for the most part, Luca enters a nightmare hallway that keeps bricking up the doors. I'm in the mood when suddenly the ghost shows up again and instantly kills me. I tried again and again, but I couldn't stop him, and there was nowhere to run. With no other option, I was forced to look up a guide, and it is so dumb. Apparently, once he appears, you need to turn around and run away. Now, Luca handles like a freight train, and there is no way I could have realistically escaped him at Luca's speed. But when you turn around, it apparently lets the game know not to insta-kill you, and then you can walk or run away and escape, but it's all downhill from there. See, my problem with the second half of the game is that most of the puzzles give you barely any direction, and sometimes actively mislead you, before revealing a nonsensical answer. These puzzles are almost unsolvable without a guide, and many are randomized. Yeah, apparently developers thought randomized solutions could add to replay value. Sure, that can work with door codes in an action game. But in a game focused on puzzles with the central mystery as the narrative, it obscures the answers, which is just why. In addition, sometimes it leads to even greater player confusion. Don't even get me started in the Bloodious section. I have no regrets of looking at the solution. This leads to a pixel hunt for a small floorboard in the back corner of a bathroom you entered hours ago that you would never even think to check. The puzzles, continue to become obsessed with being as obscure as possible and eventually results in an infamous, for me at least, red light puzzle. Now, I have to explain this because it is one of the worst puzzles I've ever experienced, and even when I looked it up, the guides are like, yes, you will probably have to look this up. Do not feel shame for looking at this guide. So, you need to gather pieces for a ritual. And after getting the first digit of a code you need, the demon sends Luca in the image of a red light in darkness, which he draws in his notebook like you've done with the other one. Now, earlier in the game, you go to Grandpa's office, and right before you get there is a hallway with the lights out and a red bulb dimly glowing at the very end against a clock, in such a way that it is designed to stand out. That red light bulb is a pretty rare sight in the game, and this is the only one still lit that I was aware of. So you take a picture and nothing happens. I spent so long trying to find a solution, trying to look for another light. Maybe I need to open the safe first, or perhaps one of my many other items interacts with the clock now. But nothing worked. After looking it up, I personally just felt insulted. See, there's another light now off that you saw at the beginning of the game near the generator. So what you're supposed to do is go inside, turn off the generator, which uses an interaction point that had previously only resulted in Luca saying you wouldn't turn off the power, but I thought that was just because we'd already used it to turn on the power, and it's just dialogue options. Like, there are other points like this. So you can go through a new nightmare sequence. There was almost no precedent, and the only clue that you should have remembered an unusable interaction point and a now turned off red light from over 6 hours earlier, instead of the one you've been seeing over and over again for the last few hours. There's no reason for this. I do not understand what they were thinking. Screw this. So after the red light, I just started whipping out the guides, because the game had already shown me it didn't give a damn about the puzzles or my time anymore. This uncertainty in what the game wants you to do is made worse by a limited inventory of 8 items. That may sound like a lot, but your notebook, camera, and pictures eat up 3 slots, and you have to store audio recordings to prevent each one from using a slot as well. There is zero reason for this, and most of the game agrees. In the early game, essential items would often spawn a safe nearby, but as I said, the second half of the game just doesn't give a shit, and regularly makes you backtrack during puzzles. The most infamous of this being the elevator puzzle. That made me have to backtrack through nearly the entire house. This massive backtracking becomes a regular annoyance that eats away at what little patience I had left. The problem destroys most of the game's atmosphere, since after a while you just become numb to the repeating set pieces. I regularly found myself getting bored and frustrated during the sections between the set piece changes when the house was just getting repetitive. I have to stress that while these issues exist throughout the game, they were tolerable in the first half. But after the Nazi goes, the whole thing just becomes a slog. In conclusion, the main issue with the puzzle gameplay is not the idea of a horror-themed adventure game, but rather that the pacing and comprehension of the puzzles interrupt the story to the detriment of its horror. Now, before I go over the rest of the story with spoilers, you probably want to know if I recommend Madison. And that's hard to say. See, while technically impressive, Madison does not hold up well as a game. Several design elements, like the limited inventory, only exacerbate these problems. Quite frankly, they make me question if Bloodious has any experienced game designers, or if they just had never worked on or played video games before. Several design elements, like the limited inventory, only exacerbate these problems. When the horror is moving at a proper pace, it is a very involved experience, and quite frankly, the first half of the game was excellent, in my opinion. So really, this should come down to whether or not you can deal with a bad adventure game derailing the horror set pieces. I just couldn't, and as a result, Madison gets a 6 out of 10. Very detailed and horrific setting, cool mystery plot, broken up with lots of pointless nonsense. With that out of the way, let's move on to the rest of the story. Warning! Spoilers inbound from this point forward. Okay, so Luca is kinda screwed. As the game progresses, we get further insight into the tragedy of both Luca's family and the surrounding area. Long story short, when Luca's dad was a kid, the grandmother started to be haunted by a demon called Blue Eye. God, this is getting long. Not Blue Eyes. Blue Knees. After Luca's father was given a picture book from a garage sale. In 1972, the demon began to torment the grandmother, driving her to near insanity and slowly blinding her eyes. Eventually she died, and it was only years later that the grandfather would come to believe her stories about the demon, realizing what happened. As Luca's dad moved out and the grandfather realized the full extent of what had been going on with his wife, he became obsessed with contacting her dead spirit to make amends. Unfortunately, it quickly became obvious that the various tarot card readers and spiritualists were all fake. He even has a card labeled liar crossed out for like a medium. In 1987, Madison Hale, an occultist, witch, and serial killer, murdered 7 people in an attempt to perform a demonic body-swapping ritual. The ritual was stopped by police officer Russell, and Madison Hale was shot dead, as we heard with the audio recording above. Her spirit would go on to bind itself to her beloved camera. Luca and his family would move into the house next door to his grandfather in the early 2000s, and even as the grandfather became more desperate, the old man began developing a more obscure interest in occult practices, and is implied to have acquired Madison Hale's camera. Then, a few years before the game, the grandfather died from some unknown cause, though we can assume either Blue Knees, Madison, or some other monstrosity got to him, probably from all his work. Shortly after, Luca was given Madison's camera and began to act very strangely, withdrawing from the rest of his loved ones. The father, shaped by his experience with the supernatural, specifically his mother's death at the hands of Blue Knees, called a priest who began to investigate. From the voicemails and how the father seemed to be putting together newspaper clippings on Madison Hale, they both seemed to be realizing that she had begun possessing Luca. However, before either of them could act, Madison put her plan into motion. The exact details of the plan are unclear, but it seems to involve swapping bodies with people to keep living forever. She needs ritual sacrifices for this, so she kills several people, including the mother and sister, while possessing Luca. She then forces him to flee to the walled-off home on a stormy night, trapping him there. This is where the game's intro starts, which I've already talked about. Go back to the beginning for more reference. After the basement, Luca is lured into the attic. He discovers a set of 4 picture hooks, but only 2 frames. Finding the other 2 and using your camera on the wall, a door appears. Picking up the lighter, you head into an impossibly vast tunnel sequence that just seems to go on forever. I actually don't hate this part. The atmosphere for it is actually very well done, and it's not really a puzzle, it's basically just a maze. And I ended up actually using real maze techniques, like following to the left to get out. The jump scares were, they kept me on my edge, so it's not bad. Not great, but not bad. Pretty basic. The whole way you get jump scared by Madison, but nothing important happens. Passing out, Luca awakens in an abandoned church and uses his camera to jump into the building at 3 different time periods. 1951, 1987, and 2022, which is supposed to be the present. Basically, there's a Nazi ghost haunting his ex-wife and the church, who killed him when she learned that he was a survivor of the Nazi regime, which fled to America. The church also has a connection to Madison Hale because it was basically after she was murdered, the church agreed to have her service because they thought she deserved a burial, despite the controversy of, having a funeral for a serial killer. The puzzle is pretty simple here. It involves placing colored candles in the appropriate spots based on the color of the maze at different time periods and picture frames that you got clues to. After the 3rd, and you pick up the 4th candle, the ghost attacks you and it becomes a time puzzle like I mentioned earlier. Once you finish that, you have the hallway I talked about in the gameplay. As Madison's influence begins forcing Luca to keep going, it becomes increasingly hard to determine who's in control, which was an interesting part of the narrative. Luca seems to forget about trying to escape at this point. He finds his father's notes, listens to voicemails left by the priest, but is unable to stop himself. Madison directs Luca to collect several ingredients necessary to complete the ritual. As time passes, the supernatural visions grow stronger and stronger, becoming indistinguishable from regular reality. After facing down Blue Eyes, god damn, I keep saying it, freaking Seto Kaiba has summoned his Blue Eyes White Dragon to haunt me. No. After facing down Blue Knees in a really annoying section where the house is randomly remixed and retrieving grandmother's ashes, Luca places the sacrificial objects on 4 statues that have been following the main character all game. At this point, it becomes clear that he's fully possessed. He's not even talking. He just softly sobs as his body lurches forward. It becomes clear he has no control left. Luca props up the camera, steps onto the chair, and hangs himself in front of the altar. As he dies, Madison is seen ghostly peering behind the camera, flashing it before his eyes go dark. Then, suddenly, his vision floods with light, his eyes shoot open, and the game ends. Though it is implied that Madison has now succeeded and stolen Luca's body. So, that's kind of a bummer, but hey, it looks like that priest and the dad know about it, so they can, I mean, she's just in a teenager's body now. They can take her out pretty easily. Now that she's not, a ghost. Like I said earlier, the horror elements in the story are well done. The intense mystery of uncovering the tragedies that layer behind all these experiences are actually interesting. Like, you find a mirror early on in the game that says Blue Knees is real scrawled onto the back of it, and you're just like, what does that mean? The whole game. And then you find Blue Knees, you're like, oh, wow. The resulting experience, though, almost had me wishing this was a walking simulator instead. Oh, shit. Wow. That might be the worst thing I've ever said about a game. I don't want to say that, but I really don't, because I hate walking simulators, but at least then I could have enjoyed the atmosphere. Like, you fucked up when making a game a walking simulator could be counted as an improvement. Damn. So, yeah, I don't think I would recommend you play this, but hey. So I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm trying a new, more comprehensive script style. So let me know what you think. Did you like this, or do you prefer my unscripted spoiler sections? If you ever want to suggest something for the review, be it a video game, movie, show, book, or even something weird like a podcast or really anything, you can always email me or at me on Twitter. Links to both are in the description, and I will see you all next time.